Remember that we started with reason.
Mark Greason is having the second worst day of his life.
Do you ever wish you'd never met Dad?
His date was crashed by a Viltrumite.
Come with me now, or this woman dies.
He just broke up with his girlfriend. Hey, not yet. Doing a thing here. And just when things couldn't get any worse.
When are you coming home?
His family is in danger. And unlike himself, they're not. Invincible Season 2 enters its endgame with Episode 7, I'm Not Going Anywhere. A very significant installment of the series, thanks to who's probably the most controversial antagonist of the series for something horrible she does to Mark down the road. But for now, she's just a Viltrumite who put this relationship in a body bag. There's a lot going on in this episode. From Mark and Amber to Donald and Rick to the Guardians getting grilled for being pretty mid. So as always, let's waste no time and dive right into unpacking this episode. This episode is built around Mark and Amber giving their relationship one last shot, making it work despite Mark's commitment to the superhero lifestyle, hitting up Comic-Con as a way to escape all the action. Which is pretty ironic, since Comic-Con famously celebrates superheroes above all else in nerd culture. Despite wanting to separate the two sides of his life, he and Amber are still very much immersed in the hero side of it. I mean, for Pete's sake, they're surrounded by Invincible cosplayers, which, although it's just played as a background gag, it is cool to have this nugget of world building. Of course, Comic-Con in a world like this would have people cosplaying as fictional and real-life superheroes. I kinda hope we get to explore how Mark's public perception impacts him down the road. But for now, I gotta admit, it's nice just seeing him have fun and not be in the middle of a crisis for once. Even if the peace doesn't last for very long. Although he's concerned if Amber's enjoying herself, because this kind of thing is more up his alley than hers. They only have so much time together, and he doesn't want to be selfish with that time. But Amber's chill about it. She's just happy to be with him, even if she's a bit out of her element. Which again, he brought her to a convention that celebrates the biggest stressor of their relationship. That alone kinda sums up why this relationship is destined to fail. She's an outsider to all of these superhero shenanigans in every conceivable way. But let's pump the brakes on the doom and gloom and talk about how this episode perfectly adapted one of the funniest jokes from the comics into one of the funniest scenes of the show so far. When Mark met the creator of Seance Dog, they originally discussed cutting corners when making comics, like recycling panels. In the show, however, they tackle all the shortcuts a crew can take when making an animated production. All the stealthy ways you can avoid animating people talking or moving while maintaining the illusion of motion. And the perks that accompany these tricks, like having more time to focus on fight scenes and having these still shots look even better than the rest of the show, even if they can get a little carried away with the special poses. This scene had my ass rolling. This is such a great meta joke that's sorely been lacking in cartoons lately. Like, we still get plenty of fourth wall breaks, don't get me wrong, but not many that inform the masses on how the sausage is made, you know? As someone who's been obsessed with animation my whole life, it's neat when a show calls out something I picked up on since I was a kid and encourages other people to look out for the same thing. Now, I've already seen some people completely miss the fact that this was adapting a joke from the comics, which is fine. Not everyone read them or has seen every meme. But this has also led to people claiming that this bit is the show damage controlling for taking a 4-month break in the middle of the season. All I have to say is, respectfully, shut up. Because animation is so time-consuming, I can confidently claim with my whole chest that this scene, and episode as a whole, was well into the production pipeline when the mid-season hiatus was decided. This wasn't them covering their bases, it's just a joke. It was a G.I. Jane joke. Unfortunately for Mark, Eve calls him up with a favor. Rex is wildin' and has escaped from the GDA hospital, embarking on a mission that serves as a much-needed ego boost. And since Eve is tied up, she needs Mark to handle the situation for her. Not only does this further highlight how unfair everything is to both Mark and Amber, but it really hammers home the fact that Mark needs a partner who's on his level and is able to pivot plans without being ditched. Like, if Mark was dating another hero who wasn't tied up in fighting baddies at the moment, they could just tag along with him, instead of having to sit this one out entirely like Amber, because it's a life or death situation for her. I think what really enforced that Amber's out of her depth is that despite the severity of the situation, Eve really does just treat it like running an errand. Let's not forget, Rex got his arm chewed off and his brain's blown out. I think him running off into battle so soon would freak most people out. Yet it's downplayed as, hey, can you check on him and I'll Venmo you later? That's the definition of being built different. And it's a place all of these heroes have to be at mentally because of all of the shit they go through and see on a day-to-day basis. And honestly, that's something Amber shouldn't have to adapt to because she isn't a hero. She may love Mark, but aside from barely having any time to spend with him, she just shouldn't have to be exposed to all of this trauma, not even in the name of love. And although he has to ditch her at Comic-Con, Mark puts his foot down and is able to get accommodations made to have more nights off and to spend more time with Amber. He's fighting for the balance to make things work, especially after a heart-to-heart with Debbie that lights a fire under his ass, confirming that his mom felt lonely when Nolan was out saving the world all the time. Mark's biggest hang-up is that he doesn't want to hurt anyone. He doesn't want his powers to be the cause of someone else's pain, not just physically, but also emotionally. Yet he knows that Amber has been hurting because of their relationship, his obligation to being invincible. And since it isn't in his nature to give up on the people he loves, he strives to remedy the pain without severing the bond he shares with Amber. And I won't lie, although I've been checked out of their relationship for a while, this episode does a great job at selling you on these two college kids being madly in love with each other. That in another life, things could work, but they're just caught in a super shitty situation. But when they go on that perfect date, when Mark takes her soaring through the sky, admiring their reflections in the windows and water, living it up like they're Superman and Lois, I'm grinning from ear to ear and am completely on board with their romance. I want to see them thrive, but tragically, their relationship isn't, as it's been interrupted by someone comic readers have been dreading to see since the show began. A Viltrumite by the name of Anissa. She's a very, very bad woman to say the least. And although the moment she Mark is eons away, she's still able to ruin his life with just a few minutes of screen time. As someone who hasn't read the comics yet knew of her character due to the fear her name evokes, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time she was on screen. But let's put a pin in this for a moment and spotlight another plot thread followed up on in this episode, Donald and Rick. The last episode not only reintroduced Rick into the story, but drew attention to how him and Donald are cut from the same cloth. Two ordinary people torn apart by an extraordinary world, pieced back together against their will. This episode sees the two of them hit their breaking points. Neither of them are confident that they can adapt to a normal life after what they've been through, being tortured by trauma even in their dreams, feeling isolated from their peers. Although with Rick being much younger than Donald, he's having a much harder time dealing with all of this. Whereas Donald wishes to just resign from the GDA, Rick is contemplating his own life. It's really tough to watch. Thankfully, Donald has a breakthrough that's able to rescue the both of them from the darkest depths of despair. Cecil reveals that the standoff with Omni-Man wasn't the first time Donald kicked the bucket, only to bounce back from death itself. In fact, Donald has died 39 times so far, each time an attempt to save people or buy time for others, which speaks volumes to me. Donald wanted his memories erased because he thought the burden of carrying all these horrific deaths around would slow him down. According to Cecil, nah, I'm just playing, I believe the guy. Donald was never aware of what he was made of, the strength he possesses. Yet in spite of this, he never hesitated to put his life on the line, to be a hero. Because powers or no powers, he was built for this. Pun not intended. I really love what they did with Donald this season, man. Turning him from a one-dimensional yes man, who I didn't really feel much for, shouting Bobby Hill whenever he was on screen, to a character that I care about deeply and want to see flourish. When it comes to fleshing out a supporting cast and giving them arcs that are on par with the main characters, if not surpassing them, nobody's doing it like Invincible. So it shouldn't be a surprise that they nailed the conclusion to this mini arc with him and Rick, as he hits Rick with a banger quote, "We're not our bodies, we're the decisions we make." Again, Donald had no idea that he was a cyborg when he was fighting the good fight. He was going to abide by his moral code regardless. And although Rick was once under Sinclair's control, he still gathered the strength to resist and fight for the man that he loves. The only soldier in that room to break free. What happened to both of these men was unfair on a cosmic level, but there would be so many more lives lost if they weren't around to make a difference. They have a place in this world, a role that's just as pivotal as any of the Guardians. Although they're completely justified to view these circumstances as a curse, it's irrefutable that it was also a blessing in disguise. Rick, I'm crying right with you, buddy. Bring it in! This was an emotional whirlwind that I was not prepared for when starting this season. Back to Mark, Amber, and Anissa though. The Viltrumite wastes no time threatening Amber's life during what has to now be the most traumatic dinner she's experienced. I hope they at least get a discount. Now, I think Anissa's appearance in this episode accomplishes 3 things. 1. Putting the nail in the coffin of Mark and Amber's relationship. 2. Showcasing the tenacity of Mark's moral code, the resilience to not turn out like his dad. And 3. Setting up the 3rd season and the impending Viltrumite War by illustrating how helpless the Earth is against the Super Warriors. Originally in the comics, Anissa held Debbie hostage to get Mark's attention, but I think changing it to Amber was a smart move that's more meaningful in the show. For starters, it would have felt a little excessive if Anissa threatened Debbie's life, only for Angstrom to do the same thing 20 minutes later. In a show like Invincible, I feel like you can only pull the "I'll kill your mom" card once or twice before it loses its impact, and if it happened back to back, the stakes definitely wouldn't feel as high as they should. Beyond that, Amber being the one in peril really drives home what the show has been saying about their relationship all this time. They're living in 2 different worlds. As Amber herself says, the moment Anissa laid a single finger on her, she was stripped of all agency. She doesn't have powers, she's not a cyborg, she's just a human being. Any sudden movement and her life would have been over. She was reduced to a negotiation tactic. And not only did the thought of that paralyze her with fear, it nearly broke her as a person. It hit her in that moment that this is what it means to be dating a superhero as a normal human being. Again, we don't get a lot of this with other adaptations of superhero media. The hero almost always works it out with their love interest once their identity is revealed to them. There may be some bumps in the road, but it's typical that the love interest finds a way to be useful in the superhero world and fly off into the sunset with their boo. But then Invincible slaps you in the face with the gruesome reality that maybe your partner will wind up as another corpse before any of that could happen. And that isn't fair to them. Anissa gives her pitch for why Mark should align with Viltrum and let Earth be absorbed into its empire. That pitch being, human beings are fucked up, yo, and our greed will drive the planet into ruin over the next few centuries unless Viltrum saves it with their resources. She argues that Mark is selfish for standing in Viltrum's way because of his attachments to the planet and also his daddy issues. Now I'm staring at the TV like, you know what? Humans are pretty mid. She kinda has a point, except no she doesn't. We all saw that season 2 cold open. Viltrum will jack this planet up before making it better. They get to rationalize it to themselves because from the perspective of their absurdly long lifespans, humans didn't have long before they destroyed it anyways, and that Viltrum is just putting it under construction for a quick second so that they can rebuild from the ground up. The logic's not very sound to us, or any alien that doesn't have their head up their own ass, but it checks out to the Viltrumites. Anissa also gains ammunition after a kaiju spawns in out of nowhere, like a crime in Spider-Man 2. And Mark proves that he would have been absolutely cooked without her help. Of course, this doesn't stop him from standing his ground, and I'm sweating bullets as I prepare to witness him get another Viltrumite ass beating. Not to gas up the Predator too much, but I do love how Anissa fights with precision. Despite giving Mark the beating of his life, no humans get caught up as collateral damage in this brawl, which also makes it clear that Nolan was making the very calculated decision to kill as many people as possible in an attempt to desensitize Mark. Even though Cecil is begging Mark to just pretend and comply with Anissa's orders, he refuses to stand down and refuses to give in. He doesn't want to be anything like his dad. He doesn't want anything to do with Viltrum, so he would rather die than get this lady off his back. Thankfully, when he calls her bluff, she decides to end their fight and leaves, claiming that killing Mark was not her task. And I let out a huge sigh of relief. Now we won't have to trauma bond with Mark for at least another season. I love how the Viltrumites Viltrumites are so clearly blinded by their own bullshit that they can't fathom having empathy and connection towards another planet and the species that inhabit it, despite, you know, living on there for years? As Anissa informs Krieg that Mark has been poisoned by the planet like Nolan. It makes me eager for us to actually explore Viltrum and get a good look at its culture up close, see if it's all that it's cracked up to be, or if their homeworld has some very obvious flaws that they willingly overlook. You know, because of their own attachment to their planet. Also, she beats Alan's ass, which is hard to watch, except not really this time. Our boy was faking it, sucker. Woo! Alan! He's voiced by Seth Rogen, yeah! So yeah, Mark and Amber finally had their big breakup. This experience really cemented that she's just not compatible with the superhero world. She has no agency when it comes to Mark, which was kind of ironic for the show to spell out since Season 2 definitely downgraded her personality and screen time to the point where the only thing notable about her still was that she was Mark's girlfriend, who didn't really have much going on outside of the relationship. She felt like much more of a person in the first season, but it felt like they toned her down as much as possible just to appease to the backlash. And in the process, they forgot to, you know, restore the rest of her personality. That could be a result of the 8-episode season, but I really wish we just got more of Amber living her life without constantly missing Mark or stressing over their relationship. That way it hits that much more when her life is suddenly reduced to bait for a villain to lure Mark with. In the vacuum of this episode, I think their relationship really worked, and the breakup was really well executed. But alongside the rest of the season, I think the build-up could have been a lot better, which would have made this scene a lot more impactful. Still, I feel for the two of them. They clearly loved each other, and they clearly wanted to make things work. Sadly, Mark can't catch a break just yet, as he suddenly gets a call from who he thinks is Debbie, only to discover that it's the one and only Angstrom Levy. Someone I wish we got to see more of in this season, since Mark's probably beating him to a pulp next episode, but nevertheless, it looks like his night is just getting started. And before we go, real quick, I just wanted to touch on the Guardians of this episode, specifically Rex. Is it just me, or are they setting him up as the new leader of the Guardians? Immortal wants to quit, Rudy's clearly not fit to be a leader, he can't even help Monster Girl without pissing her off, and overall, the team is called out for being washed. They're not in the greatest shape right now. Rex seems to be the only one who really has a fire ignited in him after everything that's happened, going out on a mission in an attempt to redeem himself with a win. Even when he needs Mark's help, he still tries to take down the biggest guy there on his own to satiate his ego. Now that it looks like the opportunity to become the new leader is presenting itself, he may view it as the ultimate path to redemption. Not to mention his new robot arm lets him explode harder than ever before. Please don't take that out of context. But as always, these are just my thoughts on the episode, and I'd love to hear yours. How do you feel about the big breakup? Who do you see becoming the new leader of the Guardians? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, throw it a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see y'all next time for the finale. Peace!